into it. Yeah, so we as Christians believe that Christ is essentially God, that he essentially came down to earth 2,000 years ago, and that he left his followers, left the New Testament, the books that we have today, right? You claimed you weren't religious, so you don't have a religion currently, right?
I follow Buddhism.
You follow
I
Buddhism?
don't really think of it as a religion, it's more of a philosophy.
Yeah.
So I follow more secular Buddhism.
Yeah, no, Buddhism mostly is just like, they don't have a God figure, they have like an ideology of good and evil, yin and yang and stuff like that. For us, in a sense, we believe that good and evil comes from somewhere. That isn't just bound on earth, it isn't just something we come up in our heads. For example, when we say that it's wrong to, let's say, murder somebody, right? If I'm agnostic, or if I don't have a religion, then there's no standard for wrong or bad. So when I say that somebody murdering something is bad, where's bad? Is it found in the mind? Is it something out there? Is it based on my feelings that day? If it is, then the murderer has as much rights as the non-murderer when it comes to what's good and what's evil. Essentially, within Christianity, we have the view that God created this earth. He created the heavens and the earth, and he created us with the inclination to know what's good or bad. That's why we know good or bad. And then it makes sense why we have moral inclinations, like, for example, murder is wrong, rape is wrong, stealing is wrong. But if you don't have Christianity, then what happens is you're led to a form of nihilism. You know what nihilism is at all? Yeah. You're led to a form of nihilism where there cannot be a good, there cannot be a bad, it's only evolutionary processes over time. I mean, I don't want to drag this out, but because I know you've got stuff to do. But what?
We're with our friend anyway.
Oh, that's fine. What we're basically doing, I want to, like, in terms of like, that's cool. So in terms of like what you think of religion, what would you say about God, for example?
I think to each their own, right? I think it's you find a system that works for you. Because I don't necessarily agree with non-religious people don't have a moral construct, because they do. It's just that, because I can say in the same way, you've got religious people who do things that are wrong, and you've got non-religious people that do things that are right. Within the same kind of, even from a religious person's perspective, what's correct.
Of course, yeah.
I think it's just about finding what makes sense to you, and as long as it makes sense to you, then it's fine. That's
so,
the way I look at it.
What I would say is, look, even if so let's say there's a Christian who goes around murdering, right? He wouldn't be following what he was created to do. Within agnosticism, so within, like, let's say agnosticism, the idea that's, well, it may be a God, but I don't know, right? Let's just say, like, you believe in that, right? Within that concept, there's no standard, there's no law given. It's just evolution. Whereas in Christianity, you are held to that standard. So what makes you a Christian is the fact that you follow these principles, keep God's commandments. What essentially makes you human is the fact that God has created you with the ability to know what's right or wrong. But if you don't have that, if there is no God, or if there is no creator, or there's no Christian God, then essentially it's basically like what I would call basically just a moral like gunfight. It is what it is. Like, who cares? You're telling me you disagree with that?
Yeah, because I think even within Christianity, you've got moral conflict, right? Within Christianity, you've got different sectors who follow different things.
But
so we are going to shoot. But
so I would just quickly say this: none of the Christian sects would deny the morals that Jesus Christ taught. All of them. Even they wouldn't deny it.
But they deny a lot of what other sectors of Christianity.
They deny that Jesus Christ is God. They think is not their God, but they would not deny that the moral principles that we live our life by are based upon a God. But if you don't have a God, it's arbitrary.
A Muslim person would agree the same thing, and a Hindu person would agree the same thing.
They would, yes.
The God's different.
They would, but that's why we just.
I would say
that's why we
can
consider.
Still have a moral framework without being religious.
But where would that come from? What would it be based on?
From your internal compass. So, like, from your experiences and what you've experienced in life. So, you know, if you've had an experience where you've done something and there's been a consequence to that, you'd form a moral.
So, if a paedophile has a different experience to you, does he have the right to claim that his actions are good or bad?
Well, he has to conform to the framework that society says. So,
why?
If he's in a society where, well, if he wants to live it, and that's the key, right? It's the same thing with Christianity. If you want to live in that Christian faith, then you have to abide by those.
But what society are we talking about? The society in Saudi Arabia, for example, that clearly claims you can marry a child.
Yeah, if you're in that society, that's acceptable.
But then, if you were to ask Saudi Arabians like that marrying a child is acceptable, and you said to them no, it isn't. what would make your society far more superior than theirs?
And that's the key. It's not about superiority. It's about finding what is appropriate for you and your framework.
So
that's the key. It's not about.
So what you're saying is that we as human beings should find what's appropriate for us and live by those principles.
100%.
And I would say
that's where extremism comes from. Extremism comes from following a framework that doesn't make sense to you. And so what you end up doing is you end up following it without understanding.
Well, I would say that would lead to brute subjectivism and allow me to finish. So brute subjectivism is basically the idea that, look, you can live how you want, but if I was to follow your principle, then essentially, if I went there and murdered a child, or I went there and committed rape or adultery, whilst it wouldn't be wrong in it would be wrong in your paradigm, it would be acceptable in mine, and regardless of what society we're in, you cannot claim it's bad or good. It's just arbitrary.
It's bad or good, but you have to deal with the repercussions of that, which is if someone disagrees with what you're doing, you have to deal with the repercussions of that. And that's the key, and I think that's where this notion of superiority, this notion of what's right and what's wrong, is very intrinsic, and so that's where I think it needs to change. It's like,
it's objective.
If that's what makes sense to you, follow it. If it doesn't make sense to you, then don't follow it. And what you do have to do is deal with the repercussions of if someone else doesn't agree with you, then you can't expect them to have the same.
That would lead to extremism, because then if it's the right of somebody to disagree with you, to butcher you, let's say somebody disagrees with the fact that you're not following Islam and they decide to chop off your neck, you can't claim that that's wrong because they've decided that you're not following the truth and you're following moral insuperiority.
Yeah, but I think again, they're in the wrong in that scenario, because why they shouldn't be concerned with what I'm doing.
Why shouldn't they?
Because it's got nothing to do with it.
No, but they've decided.
They're living their life as a then we go.
They've decided you're violating their moral principles by living your life.
Then we go again back to it. It doesn't matter what I'm doing.
But if you see what I'm doing, I'm showing there's a brute subjectiveness within your worldview. Because if I was to live in your worldview, if I was to follow it to its brute context, then extremism has to be right. It cannot be wrong in any sense.
But I mean, like, you had the same thing during the Crusades, where Christians would go around killing people.
But the Crusades are not based on biblical writ, and that's what we're saying. That's why we have the standard of Christ.
And that's my thing. It's that you can get that with people who are following Christianity.
So the Crusades weren't based on religion either. They were an answer to the Eastern Turks butchering Christians in another area.
But again,
and they were ordained by Pope Urban I. And the Crusades went over for hundreds of years, so they didn't just happen in a moment of time.
No.
But we don't. We as Christians were told you we don't base our moral inclinations on the Crusades or even what Christians believe. We base it on the Bible.
They don't base it on extremists blowing themselves up in a building.
But if we went through the Islamic text, I could clearly show you there's text that clearly states that murder is fine.
No, well, it doesn't. What it says is, if you're talking about jihad, it's a very different thing. But thank you very much.
That's fine. That's no problem. Yeah. Did you want to wrap up? And it's basically like, as you've seen there, if you're an agnostic or an atheist, ultimately your worldview leads to a subjectivism. It's arbitrary whether you pick or choose today to go out to eat ice cream or to go out and kill a child. It literally there's no moral foundation or standard in which it's generally considered wrong or bad, because if it's based on different societies, then societies can arbitrarily pick and choose on what they decide. If it's based on whether you'll be attacked by another nation, then another nation, a brute nation, could decide what you do, whether what you do is right or wrong, which basically leads to what is there's a word for it, can't remember from the top of my head, but it's basically like it's the law of brute force. It's basically just like, it's brutish. It's basically survival of the fittest, basically. It doesn't matter which state you go in, survival of the fittest, which is absolutely retarded, because if we're living to that, we might as well join Islam, become Muslim, and every person on the planet, every woman on the planet should have their head covered, and any kafir should have their head cut off. Right. What's going on? Yeah. Ultimately, look, without any reasonable standard of morality, you ultimately have to consider that raping children cannot be wrong or right, and that it's arbitrary, which is a disgusting ideology. And I think, honestly, agnosticism, atheism is worse than Islam. And anybody wants to challenge me on that, be my guest.